And you have it set up to record it, your missions?
It's recorded as well.
Oh, okay. So it's picking that up. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. Should we say anything like this is too late now.
You're on, so just start doing your thing, and I'm gonna.
I should probably address a little late, but thank you for showing up. I would guess.
That's it's intentionally like that. It's trying to lighten up.
Oh, okay.
It's live. Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the initial show of our live stream of Pirates. I really appreciate your patience if you stuck around and hung out. Hopefully you're full of a tasty beverage and some sympathy for us. A few technical difficulties getting things going here, but off to a good start now. So tonight, I just am really happy that you wanted to come hang out. We're in the studio and just kind of chill out together and kind of see my process, and happy to answer any questions that you might have or comments, and looking forward to kind of interacting and then seeing how the evening goes. I'm going to work on a few things tonight. Not sure how far I'm going to get in completing them, because sometimes you need sessions in between for things to dry and work, things like that. So initially what I'm going to work on is a gesture drawing, and I don't know if you've ever checked out _New York. That's the Instagram handle. That artist does some amazing dolls, and so normally when I do like figure drawing, it's with a model, and they're always like, oh, what kind of pose do you want me to do? And my answer is always like, give me your craziest pose, because I want to see something I haven't seen before. But these dolls have really exaggerated features, you can see here, and they're just really crazy detailed and really fun to look at, and kind of always had some ideas I'd like to meet this artist who creates these dolls and actually kind of play them out as if they were actual animated characters. So I'm going to be using Conte tonight to kind of play around with this and just kind of get this flow. So normally I kind of start working with the head and getting the shoulders, and then from there I kind of just working the torso, but kind of use the spine as a line of action. What's really fun about this, as I mentioned, was the exaggerated aspects of this. So, you know, it's almost like it's an animated character that's there in front of you. It's pretty fun to play with. So I'm not sure where this artist gets their materials from, or if they've created all these possibly with a 3D printer or whatnot, but it all seems very super custom and really ornate. They're quite beautiful. So initially, I kind of have my flow going on of where I think this position's going to be, where things are going to kind of lay out, and that's where I really just kind of mess around and have fun with it. Nothing's too detailed at this stage. I'm not shadowing or anything like that yet. Just kind of want to get the anchor points of where things are going to go. Kind of understand the anatomy and where this is custom anatomy, I guess you could say. It's a little more to pay attention to. These boots are insane. They're like super stiletto Doc Martens from RuPaul's Drag Race or something. Because even like the assets that the artist is using to have these characters sit on, it's pretty cool and really well thought out. It's really like a fashion show. There seems to be a whole community as well. Once I started following this particular artist, there's a lot of doll creators that are really doing some amazing stuff. I would love to see some animated movies with these characters. It would really be a pretty interesting Toy Story-esque type of animated movie, which would be pretty cool. Even the glasses on this one are pretty outrageous. It's super fun. And even the ornaments are all like actual metal pieces that are pieced together, and they're super tiny, and it's just, I'm pretty impressed with the amount of time that must go into these. Landmarking the eyes there a bit. It's got pretty unique and sharp features here, which is really fun to draw with. I think the hair is pretty fun too. I tend to work pretty quick. I don't, especially with gesture drawings, I don't put a lot of time into making things super accurate. It's just more about the feeling and the vibe that comes from it, which is pretty fun. Kind of putting in a bit more shadows and kind of filling in those shapes a bit more. Just making sure the highlights and the shadows are popping. It's always really important to pay attention to where your light source is coming from. It really helps kind of figure out where things lie sometimes if you're struggling a bit, not really sure where the anchor points are. Your shadows can really kind of guide you through that. I'm gonna have a bit of fun with this one, just kind of really exaggerate some of the jewelry. I think it's really challenging to kind of give it the justice it deserves, because it's pretty awesome. Alright, I'll give you a bit of a comparison shot there. Just kind of really wanted to, as I mentioned, lay out the anchor points, which for me are generally the head, the shoulders, and the hips. The legs here are pretty fun because they're just so ridiculously long. And I kind of wish I had a bit more, left a bit more highlight for the jewelry. But again, I think it's pretty fun, and definitely check out _New York. It's a beautiful Instagram feed, and the artwork there is phenomenal. It's really cool. So the next thing I'm gonna work on is actually gonna be laying out a piece using kind of diluted acrylic. So it'll be a similar technique to watercolor, but it won't actually be watercolor. But I'll use ink and whatnot to bring out the highlights and the details later on once things kind of dry out. So I'm just gonna grab my board and get started with that. So for this one, this is Arch's paper, so it's really built and designed for this type of artwork. I'm just going to use a 6B pencil just to kind of sketch in and kind of lay out where I want things to go. I did a sketch a while back. I'm not sure if this is going to translate well, but kind of the layout and where I kind of wanted things to go. So this piece is actually been commissioned by my mom. So she wanted this painting for her new space, which is really her own space for the first time in her life. It's pretty exciting, and she's got it full of lots of color and things like that. So this is a painting of where we grew up, and we grew up kind of like on a salt marsh in a small little village in New Brunswick. And she said after my dad passed away that she was out in the yard, and then all these butterflies were kind of in that area. So she really wanted something to represent that, and left that up to me. So after being in her new space and kind of figuring where this is going to live, which is how I tend to work, kind of see where the artwork's going to live, what the story is behind it, and then come up with a sketch, work with who the client is, and kind of go from there. So yeah, I'm just going to be sketching this out a bit, and I can walk you through some of the concepts and kind of layout of what things are as well. So generally, I kind of just like to bring in the skyline, and that's just pretty simple. And then from where we lived, you could, look into, like, there's like a little fishing village across the way, and then a little beach out this way that had a bizarre cemetery on it from way back when the settlers came, and it's actually still in like really great shape. It's pretty crazy being that close to the Bay of Fundy. But so I used to play in these in the salt marsh a lot, but always fair warned of, like, don't get your rubber boots stuck or you might not come back out. So I have a healthy fear, I guess, of the salt marsh and the animals that kind of live in there too, because I probably also have a healthy fear of otters and whatnot too. But some pretty crazy wildlife growing up in hindsight. It was pretty magical to kind of see some of the animals that would be there throughout the year, like rare birds and snowy egrets and moose, deer, bear, foxes, and yeah, that's pretty crazy. You take it for granted until you kind of move away. So here in the foreground, I'm just kind of like laying out where some of this taller grass would be, kind of within our yard, and then off in the distance here is the salt marsh and the well, we called it the crick, but I don't know if it was actually a crick or not. Because it's kind of funny to think back what you call things, because that's what everyone calls it. But yeah, so this is kind of the layout. So I'm just going to work in some of the details of the wildflowers and butterflies next. My mom also had requested that in one of the ponds, we used to go out and play kind of there was like 3 ponds. One was the medium and then the big one. So we could skate on these within the winter, which was actually kind of cool. But this one had a pretty sizable little toy sailboat that one of the neighbors had made for one of my brothers, but it actually stayed with us for quite a while. It was pretty cool. So we'd go and play with that for fun. So for this particular piece, I'm going to keep it pretty loose. As I mentioned before, I'll be using ink and whatnot to add in the details later. I really just kind of want to color block initially and lay things out. So I'm just going to put in my butterflies and kind of play in from there, and then I'll get to adding some color. Then all these houses that are across the way, all the stories you could tell about the neighbors is pretty funny. Thinking back on who was where and whatnot. So for my paints, I'm going to be using Liquitex Heavy Body. So I'm going to start with the bronze yellow and kind of work towards that, a bit of like some light brown, just to kind of hammer in where I think some of these earth tones are going to make the most sense to play out. Things like the beach that's over this way. Oh, you can see the cats. If anyone doesn't know, that's Stanley and Vivian. They're my studio buds. So one thing my mom mentioned as well, she kind of wanted this to be a bit of a longer piece. So with that in mind, I was kind of thinking of ways how I could accomplish that and still kind of not have to build a custom canvas, because it is challenging sometimes to find thinner and longer ones. So what I've done with this particular piece is this is a pretty standard size paper, but I'm actually going to put it in a glassless frame that's longer, so it'll actually give it that illusion of being longer than the actual artwork is, because the wall will pass through. So it should give a pretty cool effect and not make her space, which isn't huge, you know, having this big piece of art feeling like it's overpowering and overtaking the space. Also too, in thinking about this style of painting, I tend to work light to dark, and you tend to have more of your darks in the foreground. So you almost have to work a little bit backwards than you would for the regular acrylic painting, where you would maybe put in your darks first and then build on that to the lights. Because the process with this is, once you put a color down, you can't lighten it again. So you really have to make sure your lights are light from the beginning. I'm just going to dry off my brush a bit, and I'll end up cleaning it out later on. Next up, I want to put in the sky, so pull on the, I never say it right, so I'm going to say it the green shade blue. If anyone out there knows how to say it properly, let me know. Might mix it with a bit of white. Close angle of the art. Oh, Jeff, I'll certainly help you out. Just bring the camera closer, eh? How's that feel, Jeff? Yeah. Oh, yeah, eventually the plan is to have a second angle, so if you're tired of looking at me, you can just look directly at the air, which is probably ideal. This is a pretty potent blue. So I'm going to add a bit of white to it. So I want this pretty wet, just so it'll thin out nicely. Just give that feeling of some motion in the sky too. Also, too, where I'm familiar with where this painting is going to live, I'm going to add in a bit of purple as well to the base of the sky, because it's going to be darker the lower it is. That way, too, it'll kind of pop and play in with the color scheme of where this was going to hang and live. You can see that's pretty rich and quite a difference from what I've got up there, so that's a bit much for me. Not really jiving with that. I'm gonna bring out a bit more white to wash it out. Excuse you, but still want to mix that in with the others so it's not feeling like two separate layers of sky or anything. Oh, hey Kelsey, how are you? Absolutely, Jeff. All those paintings behind me are for sale. Oh, it's a couple actually. There's some I'm not willing to part with, but for the most part, yeah. What one's your favorite? so I apologize if the mic's picking up a lot of banging around I'm doing here with the painting. The chick on the right. There's 3. Let me see what you can see. Claudia. You like Claudia? She's a good one. That's my one of my favorites. Probably my, yeah, it's my 3rd favorite. All right, that's enough of the Chance Harbor sky. So I'm going to start working in some greens kind of for the tree lines and the salt marsh and kind of some of the foreground too. We'll have a bit of that. And just to add in some variants again, I'll play around with the whites, working with it as well. So that's a bit too minty for me. I'm going to pull a bit more of the green in. I may pull in a little more of the blue too. Yeah, so that's a little nicer color to me. It's a good thing going with the light, I can kind of work it in, see if I like it. Play well with the foreground, I think it will. So I just really want to work in like some random shapes. I'm not too concerned with if this is really looking like grass or a bush or anything right now. I just kind of want to block in these colors. Oh, my favorite is Dudu, hands down. So Dudu's my buddy from Brazil, and he's like my favorite person I've never met in person. He's just a super, super nice guy. He's almost like family. It's kind of crazy. So we worked together quite a bit, and yeah, I just was creating the series of Chubby Chicks, and I was just at a time when I was doing that, was meeting a lot of really interesting people globally, all over the world, kind of working together. And it's kind of funny, I've been working that way for years, long before our current pandemic, so it's actually been a little bit ahead of the curve, it would turn out. But yeah, when I was creating that series, I was naming the chicks after people I was working with, and actually giving them personas and personalities based on those people. So it's pretty funny, and some of them have actually purchased the ones that I named after them and created for them. So it's pretty interesting how that kind of came together. I just had the idea of painting fat birds, and then just based on what was going on in my everyday life, I was able to kind of make that meld. And yeah, it was a really fun show to put on. I was actually really happy with it. Maybe I'll have to do a show with fat birds of people in my life now. maybe a bunch of chubby peacocks. So now I'm getting kind of like a really minty gloss going on here. I want to work in some of that reflection of the sky into the ponds that are there. Sometimes I find people kind of put exactly what's in the sky in the water surfaces, but I don't find that's really, when I look at real life, that's ever really the case. It's close, but it's there's so much more going on, refracting light and just other reflections of things coming in that I find sometimes in artwork it's a little too mirrored as opposed to what actually might be going on. So I don't know if you've ever hung out in a salt marsh. But it's pretty muddy for the most part. So I'm going to kind of work here a bit with a red and kind of work in the green to kind of give it the color theory of mudding it up a little bit. When you mix complementary colors, it tends to go muddy, but you can kind of play with that a bit too. So here it's kind of the green and red. They're not true green and they're not true red, so you kind of get some play in there as well. But to lighten that up a bit, it's going a bit gray. I can also put in a bit of this purple. A little more white. And now it's kind of like a muddy purple, which is actually going to play ideally quite nicely with the mud background. Just for interest of the eye mainly, is just to kind of play off that. So one thing that would happen in this creek is this would be low tide. So it would actually completely ground out and you could see the mud flats. At high tide and at the full moon high tides, the water would come like right up to the road. It's pretty insane the difference of a few hours would make within that area. So you got to be pretty careful when you're out there kind of playing around, because if the tide turned and you weren't paying attention, you could be stuck, literally and figuratively. So I never lost a pair of rubber boots playing out there, but my brothers sure have. What are you up to tonight, Jeff? Thanks for hanging out, by the way. I'm gonna take a bit of this purple and just kind of place it in other places quite lightly. That way it just kind of keeps the color scheme consistent throughout. It won't overtake or challenge too much that's going on in the foreground, but it will incorporate so things don't feel so separate. Just gonna work in a bit of a darker green as well, just to kind of pop this a bit. This is a bit washed out, so I want that to have a bit more presence. Just going to use a few different techniques just to kind of give some, similar to the sky, just kind of give some motion to this long flowy grass that's going to have the wildflowers in it. And again, just based on, as I was mentioning earlier, I don't want to eat up all the space because I want to leave room for light areas to put in the colors for the wildflowers and butterflies as well. So again, to this green, I'm gonna add a bit of the purple and a bit of the red because I think I want to really darken this up a bit. Yeah, it's feeling a bit better. There we go. Hey Roseanne, how are you? How are things down in New Orleans? Yeah. Hey Blair. There is. I'm just really kind of hammering color blocks right now. So for finer details, I'll definitely go in with a different brush. I really just kind of like blocking it in with, this is kind of a medium-sized brush. I could use bigger for this, but when I'm kind of going in with like big washes, I'll use like a pretty wide, like a 3-inch brush sometimes with a fair bit of water. I'm just kind of like, as I mentioned, figuring out where I want things to be, which actually is kind of the hardest part I find, because you just have to figure out the placement and where you want the eye to go. So for example, here you could follow the mud flats kind of come in through, and then kind of as a secondary focal point, you'll have these 3 ponds kind of in the background, but then scattered around will be all the butterflies and wildflowers. Hey Jonas, this one actually is, well, I find inspiration everywhere, but this one's actually from my mom. So this one is a scene from where I grew up. So it's kind of the view from our house when I was a kid. Are you drawing beautiful things tonight, per usual? So I'm kind of going in now where I left some empty space before to kind of put in some darker colors and kind of play around with that. Again, keeping some of that lighter wash where it was, but really kind of playing in on adding the layers to that as I can go light to dark. Oh, thanks. Thanks for making time, Jonas. I hope you're not working on anything I. No, you're not on anything I made you do. I'm actually not referencing any material but my brain for this, to be honest, Jeff. Which maybe I should go back and visit to make sure it's fairly accurate. But I'll tell you, growing up here was pretty consistent or still. So this was kind of the view that's kind of imprinted in my brain like a tattoo. It's there wasn't much else to do or look at. Thanks, Jonas. Yeah, I don't I don't do well with restrictions. Freedom's a little better way for me to work. So I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna work in a bit more of the grasses and whatnot. So I'm gonna play with some oranges and yellows and some more of the bronze yellows too. And Blair, I'm gonna change it up and use a different brush. I'm gonna steal some white from here. hang on to my memory as long as it works. So another reason to work in like the oranges in around the ponds and stuff is that also a complementary mix there as well with the orange and the blues. So that'll kind of pop a bit as well. Hey Andrew, how's it going? I have painted my cats. Actually, those paintings are in another room. I'll bring them up for the next show. Do you have cats as well? Cool. Okay, cool. A litter, wow. Did you just you just had kittens? Say thank you to your son, Roseanne. It's very kind. This is the best I can do right now, Andrew. This is Stanley. I'm gonna say hi, Stan. This is a washed out acrylic, Jonas. So I'm just kind of similar technique to watercolor, but I'm not using watercolor paints. I'm just trying to go really like loose and free and just kind of like make all this grass look like it's moving and alive. Yeah, Stanley's pretty handsome. How did he get his name? He had a few names. Gosh, I can't remember the first one they had. And then it just seemed to fit. Yeah, he's just a regal little gray lion. I get made fun of a lot because I gush about him, but hey. So at this stage, I'm kind of done blocking in my colors and want this to dry actually, so I can kind of take on the next phase. So I'm gonna move away from this one for now, and I'll come back to it next week when the next show is happening. But I'm gonna work on another piece that is acrylic based, and kind of just show how I like to do portraits. It's kind of a new to me. It's not a super new style, but it's one I quite like. So I got ahead of the game a little bit and just did a quick charcoal gesture of, I just thought this guy had a cool face. And so one thing I really like to do when I'm doing my acrylics is, for portraits, is really a super hyper detailed eye, and then kind of let the rest be really gestural. I think it's just kind of a cool technique, and the result, I don't know, it's kind of jives with me. Where did my clips go? There we go. Whoa, couldn't have planned that if I tried. I'll take a bigger clip. Just attack me. So yeah, you can tell it's live. Cool. So where this one's black and white, I'm kind of gonna stick with that feeling, but I want to play a bit more with the eye a little bit, so I may actually add a bit of color there. I'm just gonna really stick with the black and white here. I'm gonna use a gray as well, but I also use golden paints too. So some differences with the paint as well is sometimes with the heavy bodies, they don't water down as easily as some of the lower grade paints, which kind of work for that technique. Vivi likes it. Hey, she's got taste, eh? So you kind of get a different technique, but it's a richer pigment, so that's why I kind of like it. Hi Emily, how are you? Thanks for keeping an eye out on the painting, Blair. I appreciate it. I'm just taking different tones of the grays and blacks and kind of playing with that a bit, just to get a variance in. Kind of highlights and lowlights where this can kind of be. I'm being really loose with it too. Just kind of makes it more fun. I'm not loving this brush. This one's a bit more got an edge on it, so I can get a bit more fine lines and details. But I want to use some of this purple background that's in there. So this is a wood panel that I've stained purple. But I also like that the wood grain's coming through. And I think the wood grain's going to play quite nicely with his hair shape, especially on this side. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this is going to all play out. So he's got a bit of a highlight there, and then I'll go in with that sharp edge and put that shadow in along there too. Then go back with the highlight of it. Follow up again with that. All right, have a great night, Roseanne. Thanks for stopping by. Oh, what's for dinner? You're probably having something really good. Again, I'm not too worried about getting everything perfect. It's kind of what I love about this approach is it's quite playful. So again, I was saying I'll do one like super hyper realistic, and I just really kind of block in the other ones. Just kind of makes it interesting to me. Kind of work in his mustache and beard. Play in the different grays and blacks. Get his mouth in there. Cool, thanks Andrew. Yeah, I've been playing more with like wood panels and kind of having a bit more fun there. I still play paint on canvas a fair bit, but yeah, it's been fun to try out new techniques and new materials. I think it's kind of good to challenge yourself and try new things for sure. So how many cats are in your litter, Andrew? So one of these blacks has a bit more of a blue tone to it, so I'm using that more where there's highlights, and I'm using the more, I guess, natural black for shadows and kind of playing with things like that. So again, not overly concerned about precision here. It's more about the feeling. Highlights on the nose, a little bit on the cheek here. Gonna play that in, a little more on the eyelid. So one of my favorite tools is a palette knife. I use a lot of them. I find they really kind of help mix the paint, but also kind of cover a lot of ground really quickly and effectively, but also allows me to get a lot of detail in there too. So for this example with his eyes, it's pretty fine how he has these speckles of light in there. Just want to bring those out a bit with the whites and then go in with a bit of a gray just to give some variance. It's not always a true white. It's okay, buds. Also kind of gives you some really cool edge work as well. Thanks. First off, Stanley's a guy. I would love if Stanley stayed in the chaise lounger and painted. Do you think he'd wear boxers like George? All right, cool. So this is kind of the technique I was talking about. I really kind of like playing with one eye. That's really got a lot going on. Really kind of recognizable. Put a bit of a soul or a spirit into that, and then the rest just be very gestural and let the viewer kind of fill in the gaps as they see fit. Thanks, Jonas. So yeah, that's we covered a lot tonight. Actually, I feel like we did a charcoal drawing of Pasha _New York's dolls, which was really cool. We did blocking in color for a acrylic wash of kind of laying out that landscape, and we'll continue to build on that, and then playing around with acrylic on wood panel, some portrait work as well. So I'm just gonna set this aside. And then I'll bring this one back. So I'm gonna be giving away this one next week. I'm asking next Tuesday, I'm asking my manager what the plan is. Thanks, Emily. So yeah, follow the rules on screen, and sorry, in the description, sorry. And then we'll figure out the winner, and then we'll contact you, and we'll send it out. So look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, and thanks for hanging out in the studio, and I hope you had fun. I had a good time, and